Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, well, I think we might go ahead and try and get started here. My name is Lee Dirks. I'm the Director for Education and Scholarly Communications in Microsoft External Research. And I'd like to also introduce my colleague Oscar Naim, who's in the arts team. And we'll be explaining a little bit more about that in a moment. But thank you very much for coming here today. I'm going to probably do about a 10-minute intro to some of the materials that we'll be showing you today. The bulk of the day is going to be Oscar going through some slides, giving some demonstrations, and I'll be kind of peppering that with a little color commentary here and there. And then I'll wrap up. But one thing I definitely want to encourage you is to ask questions throughout the time. So if you've got something, let's kind of go ahead and address it real time. Don't worry about waiting until later. What I always like to do is try and provide a little context for what we do, why we do the work that we're up to. We're the group External Research within MSR. Microsoft overall, the corporation is about 100,000 people, if you can imagine that. I still can't. Our group within our MSR is a group of about 900 people. External Research, the team that is sponsoring this event, is about 40 to 50 people. And our charter is a little bit different than the rest of MSR. The rest of MSR, the typical kind of researcher, PhD in computer science, working on the next big thing in their specific field. But the time frame for their work might be 3-5 years or even further out. Our team is has a far more applied focus. And you'll see that we're broken into 4 themes: core computer science, earth, energy, and environment, education and scholarly communication, which is what you've signed up for today, and then also health and well-being. And so we take a very applied and very practical view of what the research work that we want to get done, but we're not per se doing it within our team. What we do is we're all about focusing and getting that research done in conjunction, in partnership with people outside of Microsoft. And so in a lot of ways, we're all program managers. It's a team of 40 or 50 program managers that are enabling research projects that happen between people in the field, subject matter experts, and what I like to say is kind of like brokering relationships with the product groups. And so I look at the work that we do as finding those important connections, setting those projects up, and monitoring them. The other thing that I'll add to that, and I think I'll zoom ahead, this is kind of the mission that we snap to around partnerships, focus on the research process, and the utilization of advanced technologies in these projects. The crucial thing is that there are several points that I think are important to call out. Everything that our group does, obviously, is based on a Microsoft platform, and yet the assets that are created from these projects are typically released open source and free. And so the assumption here being most of the organizations, most academic and governmental institutions worldwide have access to Microsoft software. It's already been licensed at very favorable rates. You may or may not be using it, but your institution has licensed it, and we consider that you've already paid for the software. And what we're trying to do is say, what if we built a layer? It might be a Word add-in, it might be something that sits on top of SharePoint, but what if we could build something that helps you get your job done? And whether you're a scientist, a chemist, a librarian, what can we do to get you to use what you've already paid for, but make it much more relevant to your day-to-day work? And so that's what we're trying to do, is say, how can we make the software better? We also want to make, obviously, the domain and the functions better externally. That's the first and foremost. But we always like to be able to fold those learnings back into the product group. So that's just to give you an idea. That's kind of what our focus is in that area. So everything that our group makes is typically open source, free, and we do it in partnership with people externally. So I think I've pretty much covered this. I'll make a couple of points that, if we think about the one and kind of the overarching thing that this team is trying to do, my team specifically, is focusing on academic productivity or research productivity. And so we are very aware that Microsoft software doesn't do, in a lot of ways, what you need it to do, and that's why our group exists. And so I look at Oscar, myself, Alex, other people in our organization. we can be an advocate for you back into the product groups. And so if you've got ideas about how to make Microsoft software better, and I have a feeling many of you probably do. You can start, the line forms over here. If you do have those ideas, that's exactly the kind of input that you can bring to us, and we can maybe come up with a project. In some cases, we might be able to point you straight to the product group. But that's the role of our team in this area. And as I say, I think we're very well positioned to do this. We're not in a specific product group. We don't have, yes, we have a hammer that is all of Microsoft software, not a specific product per se. But I think that we can understand your needs, the constraints, the issues that you guys work under, and we can help you communicate those internally if engagement with the product group is crucial. I've kind of already explained what I refer to as the business model. A lot of people say, well, why is Microsoft doing this? Why do you guys release things free and open source? The idea is you've already paid for the software. It's there. You may be using it and not happy with it, or it's not doing exactly what you think it should do. We want to know about that. It might be you're doing something fantastic that we haven't seen yet. You might be using our software in a very creative way. We want to be able to work with you to scale that and broaden that and get that out there. Or you might be using open source or competitive software in a way that we say, you know what, we can match that, or we think we can exceed that, and you just don't happen to know about these bits of functionality. And so all of these kind of engagements are the things that we look for when we seek partnerships externally. And as I was mentioning, the benefit internally is that we go back to the product groups and we work very hard to see that the things that we learn, the information that we glean, gets folded back into future versions of the product. The organizing metaphor for the work that happens in our organization is based around a very, I think, probably common and easy to understand what you can refer to as the scholarly communication lifecycle or the research lifecycle. But obviously, starting with a concept of data collection, research, and analysis, moving to an authoring phase, moving to a publication and dissemination phase where you're going to write an article, write a book, give a paper, blog about your research results, and in some form or fashion get the word out about the work that you're doing. And then moving to a place where you need to store, ideally archive, and even more ideally preserve that information, whether it be data, article, book, etc. Make sure that it's available for colleagues now and colleagues in the future. So very basic concept. I'd like to augment that by always saying that there's the need to collaborate in and across those phases, as well as discoverability, the need to search and find information within and across those. And so typically, when I show this to people and I say, where does Microsoft reside in this life cycle? Most people come back with I use Microsoft Word, so you guys are definitely in the authoring phase, etc. Some people come up with, yeah, you guys have a search engine now, right? Something, Bing, whatever, so I hear that from time to time. From our perspective, we're all over that map. And now the issue is we're all over that map, and I don't feel, Microsoft research doesn't feel like we have a coherent story all the way through. From a Microsoft perspective, if I walk into an academic campus, we have a lot of assets in this area, but they're not very carefully linked together. And so the goal of our team is to say, how can we work with you to make sure that your data, your metadata, information flows seamlessly, frictionlessly through that process. And so that's the work that we're trying to do. This is a long list of projects that we're working on, or have completed, or are in the process of completing. I'm not going to go through that, but it just kind of gives you a glimpse into the number of institutions and the different institutions in the different parts of the world that we're working in. What we are going to do is focus in on a handful of those. And so what I'd like to do just very quickly, and then I'll take a few questions, but then I'll hand it over to Oscar. He's going to delve into each one of these specifically. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about our add-ins that we have developed for Microsoft Office, most specifically for Microsoft Word. But we're going to talk about the Creative Commons add-in. We're going to talk about the article authoring add-in for Word, which is based on the NLM DTD and has a lot of other functionality baked into it. There is also the ontology add-in that we worked on with Phil Bourne at University of California, San Diego, and then also did some additional work with Science Commons and John Wilbanks. We're going to talk to you and give you some preview. This is some exciting work that isn't yet public yet. People know that we're working on this project, but we haven't released the product yet. But it's Chem for Word, so it's chemical drawing and semantic markup within Word, working with Cambridge. Then we're going to shift out of the add-in concept, and we're going to move into the work that we're doing on top of SharePoint. And then Oscar will be doing some demos of the Research Information Center, which is a shared collaborative and online hosted space, in this case that we've been developing with the British Library over a course of about 2 years, and we'll be releasing shortly. And then we'll do some demos around Zenity, our research output repository platform, semantic platform for building and developing repositories around research objects. This is released. The binary was released in May, and we'll hopefully we're getting to very close to releasing the source code on that. We have to work through some legal issues internally to get that the source code out. So I think with that I'm gonna stop there. At the end of Oscar's presentations, I've got some additional things that I think are relevant to the community related to scholarly communications that aren't specifically coming from our group, but are coming from other parts of Microsoft Research. So when we close, probably the last 10 or 15 minutes of the presentation, I'm going to walk through 3 or 4 interesting demos at that point. But what I will do now is take any questions that you might have kind of about this overview, and give Oscar a chance to come on up and maybe switch. And then if you want any more detail about our team, there should be a handout. Gives a little bit more detail on some of these things, and some links to our website as well. And if there are any questions, if not, we'll hand it over to Oscar.
Oh, okay, good. Don't worry. Okay. If not, we can try. Okay. See. Okay. So, see coming. Yep. There we go. Okay. So Alex already mentioned that we have a. Oh. Don't play with me. You know, it's interesting how the demo gods are, very particular. Sometimes you test one thing, and then all of a sudden something else breaks. But hopefully everything will be okay now. And if I refer to Lee as Alex, please, we work very closely together, the three of us, and names become a little bit interchangeable. Lee already introduced that we have a series of add-ins, and we look at them as a portfolio of tools that authors have to improve their productivity and hopefully get their job done in a much easier way. The Creative Commons add-in is one of those tools, and it basically allows you to, in a very simple fashion, to add a license to your document. And that license could be a license that already exists in Creative Commons, or it could actually be a new license. And one of the advantages of embedding a license in your document is actually that is embedded. So it's basically part of the XML that describes that particular document. And as I'm going to show you in a second, it's very simple to use and to do. And it enables, let me see, there we go. It enables the sharing and the collaboration between people in a much easier way and legal way, which is always good. See, Creative Commons. So here we have the licenses, and right now you see that the document is not licensed. I can say, well, I'm going to make it a public domain document. And as simple as that, with one click, you have embedded that license into the document. And you can actually go and see in properties that we have actually embedded this into the XML of the document. So these are properties that were created for that particular document, and we can do this on the various Office products. So I don't know if you noticed, but Lee actually had the Creative Commons license on the deck.
You might want to spend a minute or two
Sure.
talking about just the Office 2007 file format, just make sure open XML.
Sure. So one of the differences between Office 2007 and Office 2003 is that in 2007 we have Office Open XML. So one of the advantages of working with XML, of course, is that in order to exchange information, it becomes much more portable and easier to use for everybody. A lot of the things that you will see these add-ins doing, because they are in XML, you can port it very easily to other type of environments. And in fact, I'm going to show you the XML later, but you can very easily take one of the Word documents, and they are docs extension. You rename that to a zip file, and then it basically allows you to navigate that zip file and the whole structure of the document. And you can see the content. You can see that everything that you have done to the document. Say, for example, you have marked some text as bold, or you change fonts. All that information will be there in XML. And that's an advantage between 2007 and 2003, because on 2003, you have to do various different tricks to provide that additional metadata to your document. And now it's all basically self-described in the XML. Did you want to say anything else? Okay, cool. So that's basically the Creative Commons add-in. Any questions there? Yes, please. Oh, absolutely. So, say that again.
So could somebody else take it out?
Yes. 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 It's oh, sure. Technical difficulties. Delete. I believe I'm just deleting the picture, and the information is still embedded. But you know, you don't have to be too smart to figure out that you go to the XML and remove it from there. So if you're really a bad guy, yeah, you will do it. So, but like everything else is an honor system. And I think there was a yes.
When you say it was a 2003 document, you just get the picture and the text and it strips out the XML.
I believe that's right.
Yes.
It says it's
Yes. But now that we are coming to 2010, you know, it's an encouragement to move forward, basically.
Or if the PDF, heaven forbid, creates a PDF, not an XPS file from the document, then you just get it printed, I guess. That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. Good. I like it. You know, now people are beginning to ask questions. That's a good sign. Let's see. We go back to add-ins. The article authoring add-in. This is a particularly interesting add-in because it allows authors to create a structure to their documents in a very easy way. So let's say you are preparing an article for publication, and you concentrate on what is important to you, which is the actual content. You prepare all the content. Now you are ready to publish that article to a journal. So with the article authoring add-in, you can do the following. As an author, you provide metadata associated to your article. So you describe, you know, the information about, of course, who are the authors, all the different citations, the structure of the document, depending on the journal that you want to use for publication, they are going to have templates that are going to be associated to the requirements that they want all the articles to follow up. And they will publish those templates. And you as an author will basically search, okay, I'll find the corresponding template for this particular journal, and now I'm going to apply it to the document that I just created. And like that, in a very easy way, you are ready to publish your article without doing any other changes but applying a template to your article and filling out any additional required sections or metadata that that particular journal requires. We go back to the demo. Actually, close this. And for the article, so here I'm going to show you two different things. So one is, if I'm going to create an article using this particular tool, I need to be able to use a template. Right now, I'm using the default template, and you see that we have a series of sections here that are recognized in the article. So we have the title, my article title. You have the abstract. This is the abstract. We have the introduction and so on. Now, one of the important things here, if I go to the add-in and I say, here you see all the different required sections that the article requires. So title, abstract, introduction, reports, and conclusions. If I say validate, yep, actually it succeeded. If I remove all the text from the abstract, well, I guess I'll have to do something to make it fail. Like, for example, I remove the author, and I say validate, and you see that it's basically telling me that I'm missing the author information. So I need to add author information for the article to be valid. I fill out the information, and I can do things such as, typical Word stuff. I can create a table, and I can actually insert a caption. Table 1, that's good. I can also insert a figure. There we go. And I can do other interesting things, such as, you see here on the right, I've been basically providing content for my article. On the right, I am adding metadata. This is what is called the author panel. And then here, again, we specify things such as, okay, who is the author of this article? And all this information is already in a metadata type of format so that you can share it. You can use it for citations, for all sorts of other things. You can add keywords to your document as necessary, and you see that there are many keywords that have been pre-populated here, but you can actually add your own keywords. You can create groups and populate them as necessary. You have subjects, you have notes, you have all sorts of different types of additional information that you can associate with the document. You also have a resource panel. And what is interesting about the resource panel is I can actually look through my document and find all sorts of different artifacts that I have included in my document, like tables and figures. And I can actually add, if you will, semantic data that relates these different artifacts in a meaningful way. So, for example, I can say that table 1 or figure 1, better, describes table 1. So now this is providing much more specific information because it's not just that I have a table and a figure. I'm actually stating that that figure is describing that table. And if you think about it, when you are dealing with semantic information, if we extract the information from this, which is perfectly feasible because we are represented in XML, you can take this to a semantic-aware repository and then harvest that particular information. And again, that's very useful because it allows you to do automatic operations that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
I'm going to add a comment there, and I'll stand up for the microphone. This is the ORE functionality that we've embedded in this, and this is, in our mind, very, kind of first pass, very draft version, very opportunistic. We're very much looking for input from people that would use this, and if you have, specific repositories or specific practices or specific things that from your department that you would like to see utilized in this way, we'd very much like to work with you to evolve this functionality. We know that this is perhaps not the ideal UI for a PI or an author to mark up their own paper, but this is our first kind of like, let's put it out there and let's get some feedback on it. So we're very interested. I just want to stress to you guys, a lot of the things that you're seeing here is our best first pass based on our requirements gathered over lots of meetings with different people, but we are actively seeking additional input on functionalities just such as this.
Yep. Yes, please. How do you get the adding? What you do is, in the case of the article authoring adding, you go to researchmicrosoft.com/authoring, and you download it from there.
Yeah. It's one of the URLs on this sheet.
Okay.
Yep. And really, I cannot stress enough that we would love to hear your feedback. And if you have ideas about how to make this better or how to use it better, just let us know. Another interesting thing here with these resources is that you can also choose URLs. So I can do something like, I'm going to say that figure 1 also describes a particular URL. And I can say, http myexperiment.org. So you can add all sorts of resources as part of the metadata in this section. You have various other things. You have optional sections that you can add to your article based on that template. You can import or export references. You can also search references if you have a lot of them in your article. You can apply new templates because, again, one of the advantages of doing these templates is you are not wasting any work. So your content is the same. All you are doing is changing how you view or how you structure that particular content, but the content remains the same. So you can apply new templates if you're going to submit your article for publication to many different journals. Let me see. You also have different panels. We were looking at the author panel, at the resource panel, which is the one we have on the right. We also have a notes panel that allows you, the author, to add notes to the article, and a journal panel. And let me show you that one for a second here. This journal panel basically gives you a way to fill out all the metadata associated to that is required by the journal in one case and the article in another, without having to go directly to the XML and edit it yourself. So this is just a convenience. But as you can see, I can add all the different authors. I have categories. I have notes, permission, article information, conference information, keywords. And for the journal, there is also all sorts of information here. And again, very easy to fill out, and it's part of the metadata associated with the article. And I can either expose it or not. I can pre-populate it if I wanted to. And again, those are options that when you create the template, you need to decide. Another thing is I can actually, let's say I go to Pubmed and I find a very interesting article, right? And I save it in XML format. So one of the things I can do is I can open that particular file, and Office Word 2007 is going to recognize that it's in the NLM format, and it's going to convert it for me. Hopefully, if the demo gods are with me, there we go. Ignore. And now we have our article here. So we have imported the article. I just downloaded it this morning, by the way. I have no idea what the article is about, but you can see that we do recognize the different sections. We have the abstract, etc. You can come here. Now you notice that the sections, I believe, are slightly different, and you have many more optional sections because that particular template did have a different structure. And in this particular case, well, you see here all the different authors, well, quite a few authors. Wow. And we have the citations. And here, this is very useful because when you work on articles, it's very common to have many citations. So this is a very easy way. Imagine that you have all your citations basically stored somewhere. You can very easily import them from that repository and put them here. So you don't have to figure out the citations every single time. So, and that actually links with many of the other solutions that we have, so which is good. I think that's basically it. Any questions about the authoring adding? I'm trying to go a little fast because of all. This is mostly an overview of all the different things that we have. But if you want me to stop and talk more about any particular section, just let me know. Okay? I'm also open to talk afterwards if you like.
Yeah, the comment that I'll add here is, I mean, we're actively showing this to a lot of commercial and open access publishers around the world. Hindawi is working with us. Obviously, NLM is working with us. But we're equally as interested in whether it be local repositories or individual smaller scholarly societies or journals. Anyone, I think, could be taking much greater use of the templates and pre-populating a lot of that information, and that makes obviously back-end processing a lot easier. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's ideas you have to to tweak or evolve this, or test applications you might have. We're again very interested to work with you on that.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing, by the way, if you have an article that you created yourself that is not in the NLM format, you can save it as NLM form and then publish it in Pubmed, for example. Oh, I almost forgot. There is also another feature. I almost forgot about that one. That once your article is ready, you can actually publish it directly, through this upload button here. So, what it basically does is that it uses a sort protocol to connect to the corresponding repository, and because the template contains all the information that's necessary for that communication to occur, you can upload it directly if you have, of course, the required access to the site. Okay. Now we move along. Ontology adding. And you can see how this particular adding can be applied to the previous one. In fact, they are all kind of interconnected. And you should actually look at them as a portfolio of tools for researchers in general, if you will. Oops. Did not mean to jump. The ontology adding allows you to download ontologies using a web service, basically, and allows you to select what ontologies are you interested in, and basically browse them. You can identify terms in your document that belong to one of those ontologies that you have selected. You can also add new terms to the ontology and save them locally so that you are basically creating a new ontology. And this could be extremely useful because, again, we are adding semantics to our document because it's not cancer anymore, it's not a word, it's actually the concept that represents that word. And you can associate it with many other things. You can also imagine moving a little bit forward into the future, how you could extract facts out of a document. And being able to represent that document in a semantic way is one requirement, if you will, to be able to do that. So associating an ontology with a document, very important and useful exercise, because again, you are adding context to that particular document. And let me actually show you what I mean by this. Okay. So here I'm on the ontology adding. I'm going to select, just for browsing the gene ontology there. So you see it has all sorts of different terms, and they are organized in a particular way, very hierarchical in this case. And I can type things such as, say, cancer is a disease. Now, you notice that cancer has a smart tag associated with it. Now, cancer doesn't show up in the gene ontology, it actually shows in the other ontology that I have, which is called the human disease ontology. This smart tag, actually called the disease one, I can do things such as I can view that particular term in the browser, and it will find it for me. It also has some additional information because not only I'm connected to all these different ontologies that I have downloaded and associated with the document, but also I have told the adding to get information from different database repository sources to add more metadata if available to those particular terms. So in this case, I can add additional markup to the word disease. And here is for cancer. I can do all sorts of other things. I can, for example, say, new disease, and then click here, and then say, I want to actually create a new term, and I want to associate it with the human disease under disease, and recognize this in the future. And if I can get to actually, I don't get to see the bottom part. Anyway, you get the idea. You can select it, you can mark it, and you can basically define a new term in the ontology. You can also configure the add-in. And by the way, this is connected directly to the Center for Biomedical Ontology. This is the only source of information at the moment, but we can add more. And you see we have probably about 30 or so ontologies. This is all dynamic information. As they add more ontologies, they will show up here. And we support both OBO and OWL ontologies. And you see here that we have two selected at the moment. Here are the different databases that I have selected for additional metadata harvesting. And we have various settings that you can tune according to your needs. Very simple, but again, very useful. Any questions about the ontology? Alex, you want to? Lee, you want to add anything else? No? Okay. We'll keep moving along.
Is there any potential that you might do something like put in anything that would help analyze like term appearance in documents based on the ontology? Because I'm thinking you could use this for qualitative analysis.
Absolutely. There are all sorts of applications. And in fact, we are looking at some of them. If you have ideas about what could be useful for your particular field, please let us know. But one of the things we want to do is actually enable people to do more things that we haven't even thought of.
I'll add a comment there, which is, at the end of the day, we're a research team, and we're a small team, but we're working in many cases with the product group, developing these things, or working with other third parties to do the development. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to demonstrate is Microsoft Office is a platform that you can build on top of, these things are very flexible, and you can build your own add-ins, and that's why we share the code on these things. We are trying to say, look what can be done. These you can turn around and work with, or you can build something completely different, but we're trying to give you the concepts and the code and probably some consulting time if you're interested in building out. As you can see, we've done a lot of work in Word. The Creative Commons add-in does also work in Excel and PowerPoint. I'd love us to be doing more projects in Excel. I think in terms of data curation, et cetera, there's a lot of opportunity there. But you can work through us, or we can point you to people who can do the development, on their own.
And there is also an additional advantage that we work closely together with researchers in MSR. So, for example, in natural language processing, you cannot imagine how many things that they are working on now that could be very, very useful specifically for this. And you can, again, going back to the idea of extracting semantic information out of a document, facts. If you have an article and you have the facts associated to that article in a semantic form, you can do all sorts of things. You can do inferencing, you can do, and also there are other type of applications. For example, grammar checking. So many things that you can do. So that's the whole idea. Let me switch back over here. Came forward. So here we are switching a little bit gears because Came Forward is a very particular add-in because it's an add-in designed specifically for authoring and rendering of semantically rich chemistry information in Word. And this work is a partnership with Peter Murray-Rust at the University of Cambridge in the UK. And I particularly like this add-in very much because this effort was born out of necessity. These are chemists that they needed to write their articles, and they didn't have any tools that were useful enough to them. And they decided to partner with us and actually create the add-in. And it has been, very successful internally. Now we are getting ready to make it available broadly. Let me actually show you instead of talking about it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new document. Chemistry. Oh, and what we are going to do also is come here. I'm going to copy this text from Wikipedia about testosterone. Then come back here and include that. And you will see that the word testosterone has a smart tag associated with it. And the reason for that is because that's a word that has a particular meaning in chemistry. So I'm going to convert it to what we call a chemistry. Oops, I guess I did not do that right. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I move it. I'm basically associating that word testosterone to a chemistry concept. And once you do that, you can do all sorts of things with that concept. You can, for example, associate labels to that concept. You can view it in different ways. You can, for example, choose the formula that represents that concept. Or, I think I have too many Word documents open at the moment. I can choose the 2D representation for it. I also have a navigator panel that allows me to go through all the different chemical structures within your document. So, for example, if I add a few more, say, for example, we have here a library of them. Let me add a couple. You can actually use the navigator to go through them. Now, another interesting thing that you can do is, say, this is the chemical structure that I'm interested in, but I actually want to edit that structure. So we have created an actual editor that one of the important things about this editor and about the add-in in general is that you cannot write what's the right word for that? Invalid chemistry, if you will. the way you represent chemistry here is using CML. And CML is a markup language for chemistry that was also developed at the University of Cambridge. And what they do is they basically provide rules. And if the rules are invalid, then the system will not allow that chemical structure to be created. So, of course, I'm not a chemist, but as I understand, you can still do certain, things that are not very smart, but it wouldn't let you to create something that is not possible to create. Now, here, this is very intuitive in the sense that on one hand, you can select either atoms within the structure or the bonds. And if you select them, you see that you can only apply certain operations. And the others are basically hidden to you. You can basically, right now I have an atom selected. I can change it. Or I can actually look at the periodic table and choose a different element. I can actually also select everything. I can switch from atoms to bonds, and if I'm selecting a bond, then there are all sorts of other operations that you can perform on the bonds. So very easy, very intuitive. You can play with this also, and in fact I have bonds selected. Actually switch to atoms. I can select everything, and then move it around and do all those type of operations. Now, if I do change the structure, I can actually save it as well. And so, just to show, I can actually change this to a nitrogen and say OK. And you will notice that eventually that the structure has changed. And again, I can choose to add a new label to it. Oops. New element. And say Evil. There we go. Very simple, very intuitive, but very powerful. And when you think about combining these with things such as the ontology adding, the Creative Commons adding, and the article authoring adding, then all of a sudden you have a lot of tools to be able to create very powerful, or actually to help you get things done, hopefully much quicker. Although many times when you have so many tools, you play more, but that's fine. Playing is okay. Let me see. You have other options, for importing and how you display things, and also, of course, as we release this particular adding, there will be ways to check for updates and keep it, the most current version with you at all times. Oh, one more thing. You can also select, say, a particular word. Oh, actually, let me do it. I can create a new element, and then say that I'm going to make this a chemistry object. So you can add new elements to your chemical structures here. Any questions about Chem Forward? Yes, please.
Some undergraduate, we are
Absolutely.
very much about writing across curriculum. And one of the things that come up is we have to show them how to write a technical paper. Rather than the technical content, we have to train in every field. Something like this will give them an idea so that we can focus on the content and they have the structure.
Yes, absolutely. So these will help provide a combination of all these add-ins will provide structure, and so they concentrate in what is important to them, that is the content. Absolutely. And the fact that they are free helps a lot. Good. Anything else? And this should be available soon. Again, we are a small group. We try to get things done as quickly as we can. but I think within soon. Okay, so we keep moving along. Now, those are basically all the add-ins that we wanted to show today. And in summary, the article authoring add-in is available now, and there will be new updates coming soon. Creative Commons, available now. The ontology add-in, also available now. New updates coming soon. In fact, what you saw here are actually the new updates. So they will be published hopefully soon. And Chem Forward is not released yet, but it will. And we will make the slides available, yes. I believe. So here you will find all sorts of useful links. But if you go to researchmicrosoft.com, you can search there for any of these projects.
Another kind of interesting point in terms of an order of magnitude, article authoring add-in, since we launched it, we've probably had something over 2,000 downloads. Ontology add-in, probably several hundred at this point. Creative Commons add-in, over 500,000. So there's been a lot of interest in that. Now, I will point out that the Creative Commons add-in is actually available in Office 2003 or Office 2007. What we've downloaded, or what we've demoed here is the 2007 version. That's the one we prefer you to use because of the open XML functionality, but there is an Office 2003 version. And then Chem for Word, I'll go ahead and say within about 2 months, it should be out, and hopefully you'll learn about it. But if not, please keep an eye on our website, and we'll make sure that we publicize it.
He's putting pressure on me to release it. You see? Okay, and we switch to the next one.
Yep.
Okay. We do Rick now. Okay. How are we doing the time? Okay. Complete switch. Now we are going to talk about the Research Information Center framework, and this is a very interesting project. And so first of all, what is it? RIC, in short, is basically a collection of tools and services for research project management and scientific collaboration. And I want to stress the scientific collaboration part because, again, it's a set of tools that allows researchers to share information in a much more structured, easier, and meaningful way. And why is that important? Well, because let's say you have a very large project that you need to manage. A lot of times you have to invest in infrastructure. You have to invest in how to get people to share the information. Sometimes, let's say you have 100 people in that project. How do you send? I mean, every time you need to send one particular file to everybody, and those files sometimes they are, large. What about if you go on vacation for a week and come back? How do you know everything that have happened with that particular project? How do you know in a project of 100 people who else is a member of that project? And there are various ways that you can, solve all those problems, but usually it's not easy to find a single tool that allows you to do all that at once. And RIC is such a tool. And one of the motivations we had to do this project was to look at the confluence of different technologies, such as collaboration, social networking, content management, and knowledge management. In these 4 areas, we wanted to explore, well, what can we do with the technologies that we have to basically explore and improve what researchers need to do in each of these areas. We also wanted to apply things that we have learned at Microsoft Research in every single of these areas, and link that to what the product groups are doing, which again, Lee has mentioned about that. And finally, wanted to demonstrate the applicability of this concept of a SharePoint-based virtual research environment. Again, RIC is a collaborative environment for researchers. You have some key features such as, here, federated search, tags and annotation ratings. You have social networking. You have a project navigation and a tool that allows you to manage the life cycle of your project. And you have personal sites and personal and project sites as well. RIC is based on top of SharePoint. So what we have done is we created a layer that provides an abstract representation of what means to manage projects. And it's completely customizable. So you have one institution, A, and B, another institution. Each institution can decide to customize RIG in very completely different ways. We ship RIG with a default template that we call. You can put anything that you want on that template, and then you tweak it around as you need. And one of the advantages of that, again, is that because it's customizable, you can tune it to your particular needs. There are 3 types of roles within RIG. You have users, the typical researcher, the people that are, doing the work. You have a project owner, who is the principal investigator in general, but it also depends, who you want to make a project owner. But it's basically who decides and manage how the project sites will look like and what type of functionality they will expose. And then you have the administrator, who is the person in charge of managing the RIG framework per se. Prerequisites, SharePoint. So in terms of knowledge that you need to take advantage of RIG, SharePoint basic understanding is very helpful for administrators and project owners, but it's really not required for any user. All you see is you have a URL and you are accessing a web-based application to take advantage of RIG. That's all you need to know as a user. From a hardware and software requirement point of view, again, it's a web-based tool, so you don't need to install any software on your client. And you access RIG through your project or personal portals. And again, here, I just want to briefly, this is again, tying together the 4 different areas in which RIGs can help you. It's content management, allows you to store information that is important to you. Knowledge management, because it's not only about storing the information, but how can you link that information together? Social networking, what is happening out there? How can you get to know people that are interested in the same type of areas that you are? And also, how can you find out what's going on that is of interest to you? Online collaboration, news groups, all sorts of other tools. RIG basically tries to put all together for you. In this version of RIG, we basically defined for our template a basic research model that consists of the plan of the studies, how you obtain funding, how do you conduct your research, and how finally you publish them and disseminate the results. And again, this is an example. We'll go through that so that you have an idea how you use RIG. But this is not written in stone or anything. You can customize it as you need. So we mentioned that for personal information, we have a user portal. And user portals are, again, particularly tuned for a user. There you have all your profile information. You can change your password. You can associate a picture with you. You can add information related to your areas of interests and so on and so forth. And then you have project portals where you store all project-related information. And as a user, you can belong to multiple projects, and you can be the owner of multiple projects as well. And in fact, I think what I'm going to do now is, instead of going through all these different slides, I'm actually going to go to the demo itself to make it more fun. If I find my demo. Yeah, there we go. So I mentioned, bless you. That's a picture of Lee when he was a baby. I'm sorry, I have to make jokes during the presentation.
I've just gotten considerably less intelligent since then.
It's interesting because I did a search for smart idea, and that's what I got. So I was saying, this is my personal site, and as you can see, it shows all the different projects that I belong to. It has my workspace area where I have saved some references that are of interest to me, bookmarks, etc. I have an RSS feed section to basically point to events that are of, again, interest to me. I have also my personal profile. Let me go there for a second. And in my personal profile, one of the cool things that you can do is, if I have areas of expertise or of interest here, I say for example, parallel computing. And here you notice that there is a section called Meet New People. If I have parallel computing as an area of interest and somebody else, so let's say Lee has also parallel computing, then Lee's picture will show up here. And automatically, I don't have to do anything. So people that have common area of interest will be linked together automatically. And if you wanted to, you could contact them or so on and so forth. You can change your password. You can associate tags with you. And this type of information is all searchable within RIG, which is another, very important feature, because that way, if you are searching within SharePoint, you can find any information that's stored here. Oh, you can also change the photo, of course. Let me actually now go to a project. Another thing you can do here is I can submit the request to create a new project. And when you try to create projects, there are two ways to do this. If you are the administrator, you can create the project yourself and approve it right away. Or if you are a regular user, you can submit that request and wait for the administrator to approve it. Now let me go to a project portal. This is a project called Research, and this is how the portal looks like. You see there are two different panes, if you will. There is a navigation pane on the left, and there is the actual view of each of these areas on your right. So depending on the phase that we are in the project, so right now, for example, it's showing me the overview of the project. Here you can do things such as creating users, or better, requesting the creation of users, because you cannot create them for here, only the administrator can create the users. I mentioned that if you go on vacation for a week, in project activities, it will tell you everything that has happened since you last logged in. Unfortunately, in my case, nothing has happened. I have to actually work on that to make sure I always have information in here. But another very cool thing about this area here, you see that we have discussions, for example, and all that information is dynamic, which is very, very important when you are trying to manage a project. But also, you can leverage SharePoint and customize that page as necessary. So you see here, we have a series of web parts. And basically a web part is a particular component that you can develop. You can either develop yourself, grab one from the community if it is available for free, get one developed for you, or use one out of the hundreds that are available in the SharePoint library. And the advantages of using SharePoint is that you don't need to do any programming to modify this page. All you need to do is say, well, I want to add a new web part, and let's say I want a new bookmark. And as simple as that, I just added my web part. I believe it went to the end. Where did it go? Oh, there we go. Bookmark here. I exit. And that's it. Very easily. And again, I didn't have to do anything. So very powerful, very simple to use. You can also tailor these specifically to your needs. Here we have a calendar, but you can imagine modifying these and have a Gantt chart of your project, for example. So every time you go to the portal for the project, you get an idea of where you are in the project. Very useful information as well. These phases that we have on the left, overview, study planning, funding, dissemination, experimentation, are again completely up to you. They are in the default template. You are free to change them as needed to represent your particular project lifecycle. But here in the study planning, you can do things such as search the literature. I can configure what type of data sources I want to have, and then I can do searches. Unfortunately, I cannot show you this one right now because my VM requires a hard wired connection to the internet, and we only have wireless, and we couldn't get that fixed. So, but I'm going to show you slides that show that this is actually working. It's not fake. But basically, it is the data sources that you are customizable completely. It tells me, what are it tells me the history of searches that I have made. So as you can see, I seem to be obsessed with diabetes. I keep searching for diabetes all the time. I don't have any queries saved. Now, once you find a specific literature that you are interested in, you can do all sorts of things. So here, for example, I saved a few bookmarks. And I could download the article directly if I wanted to, but also I can annotate that particular entry. So I can say, this is an import, well, actually this is a comment, let's say, my tag. I can rate it. I can say, oh, this is a very interesting article. I can recommend it. Yes, please read it. I can just submit that tag. And all this information, again, is searchable. So as other members of the project, they can be searching for a particular tag and then find that, okay, you identify this particular article is of interest, so they don't have to waste too much time going through literature. So again, very simple, but very useful. Funding is another interesting area, very important, because once you have an idea about the project, now you need to find, funds for it. You have to apply for a grant. You have to do something, and here what you do is you customize what are the different funding sources that are applicable to your area, and because this project was a partnership with the British Library, you will see that there are a lot of UK-based funding sources. But once you select one, you can actually apply. And the application for funding, it will depend on the particular organization. So, and SharePoint gives you basic workflow abilities or capabilities, and it's up to you to tweak it if you want it to be more constrained or not, basically. But you could actually fill out the proposal within SharePoint and submit it as well, as long as the source that's going to receive that particular proposal, the entity, accepts that type of electronic submission. But you could handle all of that through the system. You'll have to tune the template for that. That's the only thing. For dissemination, in this particular case, just as an example, you can store all the information related to your articles. If you have other types of information that you want to store, let's say you are working with workflows, and you are using my experiment as well. Here, you could imagine using SharePoint as a database and store all your different workflows. And if you attended one of the other sessions about Trident, which is a workflow engine that we have developed as well, you could imagine how you can take one of these workflows that you have stored in SharePoint and just run it using Trident, and then store it back in my experiment for additional dissemination if you wanted to. So again, a lot of possibilities. And then experimentation. And again, here, I just basically, I actually added the workflow idea over here. One of the advantages of storing information in SharePoint is that everything that has to do with how the information is stored, how do you search it, how do you maintain it, it's all transparent to you. SharePoint it also relies on SQL Server. So in here, I have SQL Server, SharePoint, and then Rick. Those are the three components that are fundamental for supporting Rick. We also have a tools area. And in this case, I only have two tools, one to export bibliography and another one for NLM format authoring that we have. And you see how this links very nicely with the work that we have done with the addings. We have all the different discussions. And these are the different forums that are supported. And again, I can see who else is a member of this project. There we go. I don't have Lee here, but I have Alex. I have 3 members of this project. And I also have all sorts of different libraries that are associated with the project, from slide libraries to project proposals, RSS feeds, etc., etc. So this is basically what the project looks like. But now, what about if this is not good for me? What about if I, need to tweak it, need to customize it to fill my needs? Well, what you do is, this is the Project Administration Center, and this is the view that the administrator of RIG has. So only the administrator can access this. And here you can do things such as, again, create users or activate users, approve new users. You can define, project sites, delete projects, but you can also define templates. And the advantage of using templates is that it's a very powerful idea. Again, in the addings, for the article author and adding, we said, well, every journal might have a different template for their particular, journal. You, as the author of the article, you don't need to do anything. You just need to apply the particular template to satisfy the requirements of that particular journal. In here, you can imagine that as the community grows, if everybody helps creating templates to deal with particular type of scenarios and share them with the community, you can imagine having a library of templates, and then you just choose the one that is applicable to you. And again, no need for programming, very useful. So here you can do some minor tweaks and some much more sophisticated tweaks. You can change how things look like, how they are named, the type where they belong to, which will also reflect in the position in the UI where is that they're going to show up. You can also add, lists, libraries, sites, and they have all sorts of different types. You can add a blog, you can add a wiki site. If you're adding a library, they could be from wiki libraries to slide libraries, and again, all of that without having to do any programming. But also, if you want to be, again, much more sophisticated, you can come here to the project and then use SharePoint directly. Oh, actually, not that one. We can use SharePoint directly, site settings. If I all site settings, navigation, and because I am the administrator of this project, I can change really how everything looks like. I can add new project phases, I can remove them, I can, move them around. So depending on the degree of change that you want to apply, some is completely, easy to do, almost automatic. Some other is more sophisticated. But again, the extensibility and flexibility are always key for us. Now let me cancel here. And that's basically the type of things that you can do in the administration. So there are other things such as you can store your templates and all the different project sites that you are supporting. And this is where you really need a little bit more of SharePoint knowledge because you are the administrator of the site. It is assumed when you install RIC that you already have SharePoint deployed in your environment, basically. And that's basically it with RIC,
Did you
with the
talk
demo.
about like the end of project where you wrap it up?
Oh, thank you very much. And in fact, for that, let me actually go back here to the slides. Bless you. I love this slide. We mentioned the creation of the project site template. Now, why is that important? Well, again, for the template, what we are doing is leveraging all the different SharePoint building blocks in order to get the customization that you need. And once the project site is created and you collaborate, you find it very useful, now how do you share that with the community? So you can actually take that template that you have defined and you can archive it and export it to another deployment. So in a very easy way, you can share basically all the customizations, all the work that you have done on a particular site.
And repurpose it or archive it for...
You can either repurpose it, you can either archive it, modify it. Yeah. And finally, one more thing I wanted to say about search is that the search that we have implemented in RIC is on top of SharePoint. And we have basically added capabilities for every single new artifact that we have added to SharePoint, you can search on that one as well. So we combine SharePoint search with our own search to be able to give the user the ability to search on the whole space within RIC. And that's very, very useful and important. I already give you the demo. And then finally, I guess, what's next? We are currently working on the beta 2 binary release for RIC, and the target release date is at the end of the month. The official release for RIC, including the source code, will be December 11th. And again, we have this project, it was a partnership with the British Library originally, and we have an ongoing coordination effort with them. They have some big plans in terms of the deployment of RIC, and I find it extremely interesting because the type of content that they have is just amazing. There are many other institutions working with us, such as Trinity College, Dublin, Leiden University in the Netherlands, Oxford Research Centre, Manchester University. But we would love to have more people deploying and using RIC. So if you are interested, you just let us know. And then finally, we're investigating cloud-based offerings for RIC. And if you need any additional information, we also provide all sorts of different sources. And you can always go to researchmicrosoft.com/RIC to find additional details. Yes, please.
So this is fascinating. Our university is grappling with this at the moment. I'm from Southampton University.
Oh, very good.
We've deployed SharePoint 2007 sort of as a pilot. But so requirements are SharePoint 2007, MOS, yeah, My Sites. You need to have My Sites enabled, Steve, because I think we have a disabled My Sites.
You probably need to have My Sites enabled. Yes, yes. But now the other thing is, if you were to use RIC without the My Site functionality and only with the project functionality, you could. But yes, and then, for example, you will have to provide your own user management, if you will, because users won't be able to change their password, for example. And however, it's basically up to you. If what you are winning by using the project portal is more than managing the users, because you are already doing that, then it's fine. And in fact, there have been many cases where people already have a way to manage users, and they basically say, I'm not interested on that part. I'm interested on the other parts that's fine.
So the other, I mean, the major showstopper is Mac users.
But you can access if.
So how much of this is full functionality under Safari?
So,
versus limited functionality?
and that's a very important question. What do we do about Mac users?
I mean, SharePoint 2010 has it covered, so that's
Bingo.
And that's actually, that's precisely the key, because you have already deployed SharePoint, right? So it's a server installation. All you need is the client on that particular machine. So as long as you have a browser that can run, that can access the UI interface of SharePoint from Mac, you are done. And we haven't, again, because we are a small group and it's very hard for us to test on all platforms. I don't know if everything will work on Firefox, for example, or Safari.
Yeah, I mean, I know that some users complain that you can access it, you can't do some things that all Mac users do.
Yes, and that
So
is,
deploy this on SharePoint 2010, because we're all going to SharePoint 2010 conference on Sunday.
very good.
Presumably it should just slot in, right? I mean, the 2000, it should just drop onto 2010. shouldn't it?
We need to test that.
Yeah, we
So
might do
that's,
that.
yeah. But that's, trust me, that we will be doing that. Just like the add-ins that we showed you were all off of 2007. You did the preliminary testing, and it was just a 3264-bit issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a. We anticipate that it's not going to be a significant issue, but that testing will happen. We will be able to release both of them. So we will-
And
we will
also,
be doing that.
you mentioned Office 2010, SharePoint 2010. We are working very closely with the SharePoint team,
Sure, yeah.
so that we are complementary to each other, and we want to influence them, because that's another thing. Let's say you discover, I would love to do X in SharePoint, but I can't. Okay, the more people we have needing a particular feature or functionality that's not present in SharePoint, the more we can leverage directly with the group and then say, look, this is something that will be useful to the community. How can we enable that? And if you cannot do it, how can we work together so that we do it? And again, that's an additional benefit working directly with the product groups.
That's great.
So, yeah. And I did study in Southampton, by the way. Yeah. So. Any additional questions before we take the break? 1, 2, 3. I guess we do break.
Yep. So let's take about a 5 or 10 minute break, and then we'll reconvene, and we'll move on to Zinstein and some other tools and resources.
Okay. Now let's go with the second part of the presentation, and we're going to switch now to Sentity. And Sentity is a digital output repository that we have developed in our external research group. And Sentity is actually a platform. And by the way, the original name of Sentity was Famulus, part because Savas, one of the architects of Sentity, is Greek, and he found a Greek name for it. But LCA didn't allow us to use Famulus, so we had to switch to Sentity. And it's called Sentity because it's related to entities, and the Z, so that could be something. Hey, we made it up, but actually that was kind of cool.
There was beer involved, actually.
Yes. Now, Sentity, as I said, is a platform, and it allows you to put together various things, because regardless of the type of entities that you are storing, so for example, papers, videos, presentations, lectures, references, data, code, it just doesn't matter, allows you to represent this information and create relationships between those entities. And apart from that, it has additional tools, such as it provides an extensible API so that you can interact with it. It has syndication, so you can exchange information. The interoperability, again, you get through the API. It has search capabilities. And also, it allows you to represent data by defining the data model that you are interested in. But these data models are not the traditional relational data models, where once you come up with it, then it's very hard to change. And no. Here we are talking about a hybrid approach between a triple store type of repository and a relational store. And we try to take advantage of both and be as flexible and performant as we can. Some of the goals of the project, again, to enable a tools and services ecosystem for research output repositories on Microsoft technologies. And again, as I have mentioned before in the previous projects, we want to create a community around each of these products. And we want the community to drive that particular project and be able to benefit of that shared collaboration. We also want to investigate concepts related to semantic computing. And you have heard the word semantic computing mentioned many times during this presentation. And part of the reason why is because we are trying to move from data to information to knowledge. And as we do that, and we represent that knowledge in an electronic form, the more clever things we will be able to do with that information. Some non-goals: support the life cycle of publications and compete with existing repository solutions. It's all about collaboration and more of a co-petition, if you will, where you combine cooperation and competition together. But it's all about how can we plug in together, different components. How can we interact and basically provide a better solution to the community? Some of the key concepts in Sentity: modeling. We use we represent data using. We allow the data representation to be in RDF schema. We also support custom vocabularies, and we have an API that people can use directly, and it's based on the entity framework from .NET 3.5. I'll talk about that a little later. I'll show you a demo. That's very interesting because even though Sentity is built on top of a SQL Server, you never get to interact with SQL Server directly. It's all hidden to you. And in fact, you could use any other store if you wanted to. You don't have to use SQL. Syndication and reuse. We support RSS and Atom protocols. Also ORE, or I can never pronounce ORE. And PMH for metadata harvesting. And sort in order to publish or exchange information and either ingest or publish information using those different protocols: sort, Atom, Pub, BibTeX. As I mentioned before, we follow a hybrid approach. Triple stores tend to be evolution friendly, but sometimes they suffer of poor performance. You don't need to model everything in advance, which is a great advantage, and absolutely that's necessary because in the relational case, many times you are tied to the object model that you define at the beginning, and sometimes you cannot design in advance what the object model will be. In the relational world, again, the evolution is not so easy. There are many opportunities for optimization, and then SQL has been designed to be optimized in various scenarios. So it would be great if you could combine some of the flexibility that Triple Store have with the research and the work that has been done in relational databases to take advantage of scalability and performance. And that's precisely what we try to do with Sentity, a combination of both worlds. Actually, move a little bit. Some of the architectural goals. Again, Sentity is built on top of SQL Server 2008, although, as I explained before, no need, that layer is abstracted completely from the system, so you could use any other storage system. We use the entity framework, which is very, very, very cool and powerful because you deal with entities at all times. And when you are programming, that becomes particularly useful. And I'll show you how. And the entity framework is part of the .NET 3.5. And we also use LINQ heavily. And LINQ is a query language that allows you to access data sources in a very, very easy way and performant way, by the way. So we have the entity, the Sentity platform on top of this. You represent a semantic data model, and we provide a few by default. We have a core data model, and then we have a scholarly communications data model in order to represent entities such as authors and articles and things like that. And then this is very extensible, and you are going to see, based on the examples that I have, how extensible Sentity can be. We have created a UI. That UI has really nothing to do with Sentity. We just, exposed the APIs through that UI. We also have examples of mashups where we have information that's out on the web, information that is in Sentity, and then we created an application that basically mashed the two together. And how easy it is to program through the entity framework. Again, the extensibility is based on the extensibility of the API and the fact that we have been very careful in designing Sentity in a very modular fashion. So you have basically components that can be plugged in. And as I mentioned before, the store can be configured and you can leverage .NET as well. Now, why is it important to store information in this particular way, where you have entities and where you have relationships between those entities? Well, if you do that, then all of a sudden, instead of having a rigid representation of the information, you all of a sudden have knowledge, because you know that in this particular example, that this lecture contains a PowerPoint presentation, and that PowerPoint presentation was actually authored by Tony. And Tony presented that lecture. And this was organized by these people over here. And by the way, there is a PDF file that contains, that is a representation of that particular PowerPoint. This might be a very simple example, but you can imagine how very quickly you can combine all these entities and relationships and come up with very complex networks. And this is basically a graph. And as you can represent information as a graph, you can do all sorts of interesting things. Now, how's the programming experience with Sentity? Well, as I said before, in this easy example, I'm defining an entity called person. I'm defining an entity, an instance of an entity that represents a person. And in this case, Tony is a new person. I'm creating also a publication, and I give it a title. And then I basically instantiate some of the values associated with the publication, like some of the citations that it has, the authors. I actually create a new tag also and associated to it. And you will see when we go to the example, to the demo, that because all of this is part of the entity framework, it's extremely easy to program. And even if you haven't programmed in a while, if you do that within Visual Studio, because you have IntelliSense, it's just very straightforward and easy. And in fact, instead of talking, let me show it to you. So first of all, I'm going to show you the example of the mashup. In Sentity, as I said before, we have information stored in a semantic way. We have entities, we have relationships. In this particular example of an application of Sentity, what I have done, while it is running, I cannot show you, but I'll show you in a second. What I have done is, we went to my experiment, and we downloaded a bunch of information related to authors and who they are related to. And we store all that in Sentity. We actually store the metadata associated to those entities in Sentity. So, and the actual information, for example, articles, lectures, is still in my experiment. Then I did a search for Carol Goebel, and I found her here. And then, you know, there we go, Carol.
Slightly unnerved.
And you know, Carol, Sabas always uses your name when he does this demo.
He also owes me money, by the way.
We don't know where he is.
Yeah.
Sorry, can't help you there.
But basically what I did here is I searched for Carol, I found her, and then I took here JITs, and I basically say, you know, I wanted to expand this node. So basically what I did was, you know, have Sabas here, click on it, and they say expand node. And it's basically showing me the different people and how they are related to one another. And the interesting thing, this visualization tool, by the way, is called Geyser, and it's another product that we are planning on releasing soon. But it's just a simple way using WPF to, you know, display information. So you can go to a person, you can right-click, you can expand that node, but also you can do things like this. And I don't know, I don't think we have the audio. We are actually streaming video directly through Sentity. So the fact that, I love that song also. Oh well, anyway, we can have too much fun. But basically, regardless of the type of data that we are storing here in the graph, you are able to manipulate that data as necessary. And this is just, you know, a very simple example. Again, we have data in my experiment, we have data in Sentity, and we just mash it together using this application. Now, if I, not this one, here, mashup, yes. Bring that one back a little bit. So here is how we imported the experiments, the user from my experiment, and this is basically the code for the mashup. And we are also planning on releasing the source codes of all these samples so that you can use them as a, you know, a guideline to start playing with it. But there are all sorts of things that you can do. Let me close this one. And let's bring up the next one. There we go. Now, I mentioned before that, again, we store semantic information, and I mentioned the word inferencing. So once you start storing semantic data, then you think, okay, so if I can relate things, then I can ask much more complicated questions, much more interesting questions that I couldn't do otherwise if I didn't have semantic information. So this demo here uses another research project from Microsoft called Oslo, and basically what it gives me is a console where, as I type, it has a grammar associated to it, and I can use that grammar to create my entities and relate entities to one another without having to do programming. I can basically do everything through this particular interface. Now, because I already populated my demo data in English, I'm going to have to use words in Spanish so that they are not in the database already. So let's say María, I'm going to say María conoce a, Oscar already exists, so I'm going to say María conoce a Pedro. Conoce, it's a knows, basically, it's the verb knows. And I'm basically saying that María, oh, actually, no, I did it wrong. Because I think this is probably going to fail because, yes. So first of all, I have to say María is a person. And I have to establish what María is, so right? So the first time, the system didn't know anything about María, didn't know anything about conoce a, it didn't know anything about Pedro. Now I'm establishing that María is a person, and that Pedro is a person. Now, I'm going to say that María conoce a Pedro. And because we know that María is a person and that Pedro is a person, now we are establishing a relationship. And we have created that relationship inside Sentity already. So if I say, María conoce a, who does María know? Pedro. Now, if I say, who does Pedro know? Nobody. Why? Because we haven't defined this relationship to be symmetric. Okay? Now, let's say María, Pedro. Now, let's say Pedro conoce a Pablo. Oops. Pablo is a person. First. Now, Pedro. Now, if we ask again, who does Pedro know? Pablo. But if we ask who Pablo knows, nobody. So now, let's do the following. Conoce a is transitive. No. I'm trying to remember. I forgot the syntax. Predicate conoce a is transitive. There we go. Predicate conoce a is symmetric. There we go. Now, if I say María conoce a, it's going to say Pablo and Pedro. What we have done here is we have added properties to that relationship, and we have defined that the relationship is not only transitive but also symmetric. So if I say Pablo conoce a, it's going to say also María and Pedro. Very simple, very easy. All those entities now exist in Sentity, and you can take advantage of it. So this is a good example of an application that you can create to populate Sentity. So again, it all depends on how you want to use it, basically. And this is an example also of how you can create simple inferencing within Sentity. Now, Sentity does not provide inferencing. The application here is that's providing that layer. So if you have your own inference engine, you can imagine plugging that into Sentity. Any questions? No? Good. I keep moving forward. And then, finally, then I just want to show you quickly here this console application. This is a very simple application, and what I want to show it here is if you create a new project within Visual Studio, all you need to do to use Entity is you add the entity framework, you add the core and the scholarly communication data model, and the scholarly communication ones because I want to do an example that I have to do with journal articles, so that's why I add it. You add them in your program, and you basically do things such as the following. You say for each, go Barbie in Entity resources, and I'm actually going to look for something else. Let's say it's just of type person, right? And I'm going to display right line. I'm going to display, let's say, oops, right line, yeah, P. I guess I made a mistake first. Of course, of type. Person. And let's say I'm going to display the last name. If I run this, I'm going to display basically all the journal articles that are defined in Entity and all the last names of the people defined in Entity now. Very simple, very quick, and with IntelliSense and the entity framework, you can actually navigate through the data model in a very simple way. And with that, we finish our demo. And just to wrap up, Sentity is a research output repository platform. And again, you can represent all sorts of various types of data, including papers, videos, presentations, and define relationships between them. And one of our goals is to actually support MSR publishing and dissemination platform for all research output and enable a tools and services ecosystem. So we want you to play with it and tell us, how we can make it better to meet your needs. And the possibilities, as you can see, are basically endless. I just show a few examples of what you can do on top of Sentity, but it's really up to you. Oh, and I didn't even show you the UI. Very, very, very quickly, we created here a web-based UI. So you can actually, browse Sentity, search, you can manage it, you can access different services, you can look at tags. I'm not going to go through this, but this is actually shipping with Sentity. And the whole idea was to provide an easy-to-use interface right off the box with Sentity. So, and with that, I think I pass the button again back to Lee, unless there are any questions. Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yep. Sorry. And we have to switch the mics.
All right, thank you very much, Oscar. He has the harder job. I get to just do the intro, and then for closing here, what I wanted to also kind of more for awareness than for anything else is I want to walk you through about 3 or 4 bits of technology that come from elsewhere in Microsoft research that I think are very relevant to this audience that have to do with scholarly communication related topics. I'm just going to kind of cycle through them pretty quickly, but and if you do have any questions about these, I'll try and field some here. Follow up on that. I'm more than happy to broker introductions or communication specifically with the people that are responsible for these technologies. One is something that came out of MSR research and is now being utilized on as part of Bing is a translation service, Microsoft Translator. Several folks have this capability where you can obviously do cut and paste and get some machine translation back. We have seen some interesting applications of this. The URLs are down here. What I wanted to do quickly is demo some of what we've seen. So, I mean, obviously the functionality, you get a bit of text and you're unfamiliar with, or you want to find out what it says, German, English. Okay, let's do the translation. And then, boom, I can actually read some of the stuff from this Heidegger piece. So this is the website. The one thing I want to point out is that there's a lot of information down here for following up if you're interested in this to delve into this. Some of the cool things that we've seen done with this, I'm going to, again, give an example from Savas. This is Savas's blog. But what you can get from them from that website is actually this little embeddable widget that allows you to, on a page, do the translation. So you can say, okay, I'm on this web page, Savas has embedded this, and you can pick the language that you want to do the translation into, pick Greek, and then on the page, it does the translation right there. And again, I'll stress the fact that it's machine translation. It's not beautiful, it's not perfect, but if you go to a web page and you don't know what it is at all, you've got this ability to do this. Or if you're publishing and you're making your own pages available and you want to embed this in and make sure that you can see example of the list of possible languages that you can translate to and from. So I just wanted to make sure that you saw that. Now we've tried to communicate this out and bring it to the attention of some folks. The first one, actually, these are the first people that did it, working directly with the team in MSR, but Cielo, which is a Scientific Electronic Library Online in South America, used it for all of their content. This is basically a repository aggregation for Spanish, Portuguese, English, and I actually think some Arabic papers get published here as well. But it's lots of scientific articles, and let's zoom in. Say I'm looking for an article on benzene. I'll just show you how they kind of manifest it. So what they've done here, I'll just pick the first article. So this pulls up the article, and say I'm in Portugal, and I found this article in English. How they've utilized the Bing translation service is they kick you off and say, okay, here are your options. It's currently in English, and here are your options. So it's a sparse matrix. Not everything goes to everything. But here I could actually say, okay, I want to look at the Portuguese translation. And it went a lot faster earlier. Here we go. And what it does is it kicks it off and sends this actually to this interface that actually lets you see the side-by-side translation. So the original and the translation. So you're able to make again, it's in machine translation, so you're able to see back and forth. There you go. So gives you an idea about that piece. Another repository that has done it is Gyro in Japan. And so this is a 128 different repositories across Japan are utilizing this in a very similar fashion, but I just wanted to point out. And I just think this is a fantastic tool for making sure that the content that is housed in your repository is made available. Again, machine translation is never perfect, but this definitely makes it much more available to the world. Moving on along. Another tool that some of you may or may not be familiar with comes out of Microsoft Research, which is something called the Conference Management Tool. As you can imagine, going back to 1999, I'm going to guess there were probably 400 or 500 researchers in MSR at that point. But they found themselves doing a lot of the same things over and over and over again when getting prepared to either host a conference or go to conferences. And so they said, this is ridiculous, let's build a conference management service. So Microsoft, for the better part of 10 years, has developed the service and made it available as a free service online. And you see the URL up there. But it really supports the whole conference management workflow, from paper submission all the way to and some of you have perhaps even used this. I just like to make sure that people know that it's out there and it's a free service that is available. What I like to show is the usage is for something that really isn't advertised. It is basically word of mouth. They're up to somewhere around 250, 300 conferences a year every year. Another thing, this is another bit of search technology that's coming out of our MSR Asia lab. So it's Microsoft Research, their academic research, which is still in beta, but you'll again see the URL there. Formerly known as Libra, and it's very focused on computer science. But the interesting thing about this is they are starting to add new bits of content, and so, or I'd say new repositories of content. So they've just, in conjunction with Paul Ginsparg at Archive, are starting to verge outside of computer science. And in fact, if you go there and type that URL and put WAC Archive, ARXIV, you'll be able to see physics papers as well. So they've indexed that as well. And their plan is to continue to kind of build the core functionality in and around the corpus of computer science papers that they have now. But their plan is to start extending that and putting other content sets in and start moving from domain to domain. So what I thought I would do is give you an example of some of the cool things. You can see I've listed the functionality that's out here, and I'll share these slides. But let's take a look at what the interface looks like. And this is, again, available to everyone to take a look at right now. So 4 major pivots, papers, authors, conferences, and journals. And under each one, you'll see it says they'll make available the most relevant or top-ranked papers. So literally pick a topic, go to it, and then you're seeing the most highly cited papers in that area, related authors, related conferences to that. And again, aggregated page for a certain paper. So when you actually drill down to a paper, you get links to the authors. You can actually go straight to the paper. Citations, references from that paper. So it's deconstructed it and then reconstructed it on this site, hot linked to other relevant assets. You can see a top-ranked paper from a conference or from a journal, number of citations, or see the papers all related to a certain author. I thought in this particular case we got Bill Buxton, but we've got another guy in the room here. We thought we'd pick on David. And here we go. So all of the authors that he's published with, conferences he's attended and given papers at, etc. Then you can actually go to David, and then there's a page that's basically created about David on this. And so you see these publications, not too shabby, David. Citation count. You can even go to his webpage. So it's figured this out and has linked over to David's page. So this is, I just, again, wanted to demo this. It's not relevant for all domains, but I think we're going to start seeing this adapt and get some additional bits of content. You can even, I'm sorry, I missed this part. They have a cool little interface to show you what other folks he's written a couple papers with Wendy. So, and then you can pivot around and see who else he's worked with on various papers. All right. This I just wanted to point out, although our group has been doing work in, as I mentioned, the add-ins for mainly for Word, but a couple of other for Office. There was one that was done for semantic connections and network visualization that's in Excel. That's code Node Excel, and the documentation and the code are actually available at CodePlex, and that's the visualization up top. Gazer is the bit of functionality that Oscar was showing earlier that we have running on Zenity right now. As soon as we're able to release the Zenity source code, we plan to do the same with the Gazer source code. And then Facet Lens is a different way of visualizing academic journal. And this is a research project. Again, the URL is here, and those are some screenshots from it over on the side. But these are things that we're seeing from surfacing elsewhere within Microsoft Research that we think it's relevant. We wanted to get the word out about these assets. Microsoft is also involved in the Planets project, which is related to digital preservation in Europe. So something around I think 10 it's probably across the board. It's probably about 20 different institutions, but a conglomeration of national libraries, national archives, major research university libraries, as well as about 3 corporate partners have been working on the digital preservation technologies. Microsoft is one of those commercial entities that's participating in that, and as part of that, and our group is funding that participation, we've been very interested in saying how can we make sure that all of the files, all the proprietary Office files that Microsoft has created up until the Office 2007 file format, OpenXML, we said how can we make sure that those are easily available? And so what we've built here is a document conversion service that allows, right now it's pretty much one-off as part of this, but you can go from Office into any other version of Office or into ODF if you want, or just plain in XML. And back again, so it goes both ways. We had this developed, and the source code is actually available on SourceForge as part of the project. What we are intending to do moving forward is do much larger scale batch conversion. So that's the intention that we'll be moving on in this area. And I think that was it for the things that I wanted to kind of bring, get on your radar, bring to your attention. That I think are relevant to this area. And with that, I think we're at a close. I hope that this has been informative. I hope it's given you some ideas. I hope it makes you want to contact us and set up some time to maybe go a little bit deeper or have a follow-up project or discussion about this. If there are any questions, let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if not, there's, I guess, a cocktail party in 15 minutes. So
I told you before, so then you...
okay, exactly. But please go to our website, stop us over the next couple of days and ask us any questions, or don't hesitate to contact us as well. If there's something you want to tell folks back at your institution and we want to set up a conference call or a live meeting, we'd be more than happy to walk you through these tools or others at your institution. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.